Welcome to the Risk and Repeat podcast, episode number 237. I'm Rob Wright, Security News Director at Tech Target, and I am here with Senior Security News Writer Alex Kalafi. Alex, welcome.
Thanks, Rob.
How are you doing on this wonderful late August Monday morning?
I'm good. The summer feels like it moved in about, I don't know, a week and a half. So that's I guess that's one of the new parts of fatherhood I'm still getting used to is that time just moves at a blur.
Yep.
But that's it. How are you?
Good. Hey, school starting this week. Can't wait. Another great thing about parenthood, I guess.
Sure.
So, yes, we are recording this on August 26th, the morning of, and we are going to discuss a story that's been in the news for a while, but I think we've kind of sort of been tentatively watching what has unfolded with this story, or not unfolded, I guess more accurately, to kind of figure out what we want to talk about it in relation to, because it touches a lot of things, and there's it seems like it could be pretty significant, but we still don't know a lot about what's going on. And I am, of course, talking about the NPD breach.
Yep.
National Public Data.
Which is not to be confused with the analyst firm Circana, which was previously known as NPD's, and their video game monthly sales reports are referred to as the NPD's.
Yes.
Which is very confusing to me, at least.
Preach, brother. Yeah. Yeah, the NPD reports in a previous life as a journalist, those were pretty important. Probably still important. Anyway, yes, so NPD. Alex, you wrote the initial story for us. Why don't you take us through what happened, and we'll go into sort of where this whole situation stands as far as we know today on August 26th.
Yep. So I'll do the brief overview, and then I'll talk about some of the weirdness that's been happening outside of the security hemisphere we should operate in. Okay. So National Public Data aggregator, one of those companies that will also offer to do background reports for, I think, companies primarily, but I think they're willing to do it for individuals, if I'm correct. But in any case, their main bread and butter is that they collect data through various means, and that they offer background checks. So they published a couple weeks back a breach disclosure to its website saying that a third-party actor attempted to access data in the company's possession in December, and then seemingly leaking said data in April, and then again over the summer. This has been sort of murmuring, I think, on some, I think it was breach forums, that like there's been sort of talk about this data for a little bit, but it's been weird. And I think with the breach disclosure, it's everything sort of got really loud and really public. Anyways, the personal records, there are supposedly billions of them, 1.8 billion, I believe. Or no.
2.9.
2.9. A threat actor known as USDOD, presumably a play on U.S. Department of Defense, in April offered 2.9 billion personal records for sale for 3.5 million USD in Bitcoin or Monero. They claim to have records belonging to the entirety of the US, Canada, and UK populations. And I think when this sort of went wide earlier this month, it left security circles and went into people who don't think about cybersecurity circles. So I had family asking about it. I had friends mentioning it. I'm sure you had the exact same thing happen of people saying, oh, my social security numbers were stolen. Everyone's social security number is out there. Hackers got it. They're gonna steal your identity, so on and so forth. And
Yep.
to be honest, I don't blame people for thinking this way because it did seem like there were billions of records, which I mean, that includes names, that includes things that every data aggregator already has on us.
Hmm.
Um, but it also does include some social security numbers in there. But it seems like there's a lot of dead people in those records, and there's a lot of incorrect data within those records. So it's been very hard to determine exactly how much information is part of this breach. Um, but the way the news was initially reported, not by us, and I'm not going to call out specific outlets, but I would say the general tone of some of the reporting has been that this is like one of the worst breaches to ever happen, and that this is going to be a nightmare for everyone. And it does seem like there's a lot of data out there, but the more we think about it and learn about it and learn that 2.9 billion records is not 2.9 billion people, and that a lot of this data seems to be incorrect or incomplete, or there are dead people involved, or like I said, um, the billions of people figure that folks were initially tossing around seems like that shrunk to hundreds of millions. And then according to the main breach disclosure that came out, I think last week,
I think that's correct.
uh, only a few million um complete enough records of people, I guess. So
Yeah,
that
the
that's
the
that's sort of the weirdness of this, is that there's this super scary information going around, and that there is kind of a lot of data, but it's hard to make heads or tails of how bad this is, but it seems to not be as bad as we were kind of scared it was.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
About a week ago, uh, NPD published a data breach notification letter to the main government website that tracks the basically the Office of the State Attorney General. They track data breach notifications that may impact, citizens of the state. And I think the threshold, if I remember correctly, I think it's pretty small. It's like if there's a major data breach and it affects somewhere between, like 5 to 10, or maybe it's a little higher, maybe it's 50 residents of the state, they have to publish a notification letter and it has to be uploaded to this website. Other states do this as well. Montana, Massachusetts has one, although I think the threshold is a lot higher. Yeah, when they
Mm-hmm.
published this notification letter on, I believe it was the 17th, so it was over a week ago. They said the total number of people affected by the breach was 1.3 million, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I'm not a math major. It's a far cry from 2.9 billion.
Yes.
And we should also note that we followed up with NPD asking about this data breach notification entry. Um, and there was no comment, no
Mm-mm.
response. And just a quick word about these notification letters. The letter itself does not say 1.3 million. The letter is pretty vague. It does not say much, if anything. And it's just sort of general, same type of stuff we see in the website notification for the breach. Third party bad actor trying to hack into data in late 2023, December 2023, potential leaks of certain data in April and then again in the summer. So just a rehash of what's there. What's interesting about this, though, is when a company submits a data breach notification letter to Maine, there's other data involved that comes in sort of this in the form of this notification page that precedes the letter, and it has figures in there that I assume the organization that was breached has to supply when they upload this letter. So it's like total number of people or persons that were affected, total number of main residents, I think in this case was like 2,700 or something, the date the breach occurred, the date the breach was discovered, so on and so forth. So there's information on these pages that is not contained in the letter. So in this case, could be a typo. It could just be someone throwing out a number just because, who knows? It's hard to say because sometimes we used to use these data breach notification databases across various states pretty heavily for our ransomware database tracker that we would track ransomware incidents that were disclosed each month. And some of the numbers that the victim organizations would throw in there seemed kind of strange. Sometimes really, really big, sometimes really, really small. And you're just kind of wondering like where those numbers are being pulled from. The numbers sometimes don't match what they're saying publicly on their own websites or in other areas to regulators. So long way of saying the 1.3 million number could be inaccurate, although it's been widely reported. So I assume, I guess the question for you, Alex, don't you assume if NPD only had 1.3 like live consumers, citizens, however you want to track this, only had 1.3 people, 1.3 million people affected, they would be, I don't know, shouting this from the rooftops. They would be out there sort of promoting that number and dispelling the 2.9 billion.
I don't know what to make of this whole story, Rob. And I don't mean to talk broad. I want to answer your
Sure.
question specifically, but I mean, it's just a weird story to be one of the biggest cybersecurity stories of the year.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying it necessarily is in scope of breach. I'm saying it is in terms of societal penetration, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
Like you go to the National Public Data website, it's a very like dinky, generic, looks almost like a default Squarespace website.
Yep.
Like if you're trying to like make your own website, it's filled with stock images and some really surface level copy about how its technology works. And I presume because this hasn't been raised elsewhere, that even if it's a small company, it's probably a mostly legitimate one, by which I mean operating within the lines of the law to the best of anyone's guess, other
Yep.
than whatever may come out from this breach about them not protecting user data, whatever. Which then raises the question of, I understand that ton of companies, some we've heard of, thousands we have not, are buying and selling our data to each other at all times.
Yes.
However, I assumed what that means is names, sometimes email addresses, demographics information, browsing habits, depending on who the seller and buyer is, and stuff that is upsetting to think about, but is within the general contract of using the internet, the crappy modern internet that we all sort of sign. Um, how do they have even a million social security
Mhm.
numbers?
Mhm.
I'm not, that's the part I'm still trying to understand. So it's like, what do I make of this number being smaller? I don't even know what to make of the number being that large in the first place.
Yeah, you raise an important point about all of this, which is whether this data is legit or not, I don't know. Threat actors lie all the time. We've been through this again and again. We talked about it with the Lockbit claim that they hacked the Federal Reserve. I mean, we just sort of get carried away, I think, a little bit with threat actor claims. And just because, the data allegedly has 2.9 billion entry, like fields or entry, I get it. It doesn't mean that the data is kosher. And threat actors lie all the time and exaggerate, and they talk up their wares and their the information that they've stolen to sort of make themselves look bigger and better and more valuable. And
And just to clarify, and where do they even get SSNs from in the first place?
yeah. So data brokers, they're there's been a lot of great coverage over the last, well, I mean, decade plus now, going back to the Snowden revelations about how these organizations are allowed to sort of collect data and disseminate some of this data, sell it to other data brokers, sell it to private investigators, sell it to police. In some cases, there have been some great exposés, a lot of great journalists out there covering this stuff. There have been some excellent stories about how stalkers can just obtain this data about their potential stalking victims and track them down. It's insane. It's a very, I want to say shady industry. But that's not really the right word, because I can't speak to how these organizations operate internally and like what their safeguards are and what their security measures are in terms of collecting the data and disseminating it. But what I do know is that this has alarmed a number of folks in the private sector, a lot of privacy professionals and privacy advocates, organizations out there like Electronic Frontier Foundation. And there's also lawmakers, Ron Wyden of Oregon, Senator Wyden being among probably the biggest. He had something earlier this year about, I guess he released documents confirming that the NSA, the US National Security Agency, was buying data from these data brokers, and specifically internet browsing records. And it's like, okay, number one, how are these data brokers getting this information? Well, they're probably buying it from third party like trackers and like advertisers that are using this data. So like when you opt into, certain, like when you're using certain browsers and you don't go in private mode or whatever, they're just sweeping all that data up and then they're collecting it and then sending it out to various parties, including the NSA. And apparently this violated an FTC order that held that data brokers can't, you've got to obtain consent from consumers before you sell their data. Now, I don't know about you, Alice. I've never, ever had anyone from any data broker or anything that could be conceived of as a data broker come to me and say, hey, we want to sell some data. Are you okay with this? I don't know. Have you ever had that happen?
No, it's usually a complicated mess of check boxes and agreements and single check boxes covering the TOS
Yeah.
and selling data.
Yep.
And no, and then some company selling your data anyway.
Yep.
And then, yeah,
No,
that's what happens.
yeah, it's like the Wild West. So it doesn't surprise me that an organization like NPD could have 2.9 billion unique records and social security numbers. Whether or not those were stolen, whether or not this data is legit, like I said, who knows? We still don't really know. It's hard to get verification. I don't know if you had mentioned the Troy Hunt blog post from Have I Been Pwned. He wrote something, a very, very good analysis that was essentially, if I can summarize, this is getting a little bit too much attention. Don't panic. There's some inaccurate data. There could be duplicate data. The social security numbers aren't necessarily tied to active email addresses or home address. Like just some caveats to all of the sort of breathless reactions and coverage that this NPD breach was getting. That said, I think this shines a light on the fact that these organizations they've been granted the ability to operate with apparently not a lot of oversight. I mean, FTC order aside, this is pretty chilling, right? That you can, like you said, even if it's just 1.3 million, how did they get these numbers? How did they get what
I
was
agree.
supposed to be private data? And
Well, here's one theory I have while we were talking is I'm thinking about the fact that they're working with these companies to do background checks on prospective employees, I believe. I could see a world where in NPD's data entry process on the client side, because I bet no customer will ever agree to this.
Sure.
Maybe the documents that get fed into this on the employee to be used for background checks include SSNs, even though that would be a gross violation of data privacy.
I'll just say, add a little personal anecdote. I recently had to go through a process to get a background check for to be able to participate in youth sports. They've got to do a criminal background check, and you got to upload a lot of information, including your social security number. I get that. I know that's important for verifying the identity of someone, but the amount of information that I gave over to this background check service, at no point did I see anything in there that said, we're going to retain this information and we may sell it to a third party, or we may disseminate it to a third party, or we may do this or that. I mean, it asked for consent. I said no. And I think that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of it. But how did these organizations, I mean, like, if everyone was doing that, they wouldn't have much of a business selling or moving that data, right? So there's got to be some like wiggle room or gray area where they're able to get around this stuff. And then the other thing that bothers me about all this is, like, this is just another organization that has my social security number, which normally, like, I think we're all, you, me, Ariel, people in InfoSec are kind of resigned that, a lot of our information is out there. But the concerning thing is that when I call my bank, or I call my like a credit union, or anything that is remotely financial, they always ask for your social security number as verification. And that number's been compromised for a lot of people already. Take the NPD thing out of it. We should not be using those numbers to verify identity. Or I take that back. You can use them for partial identification, but a lot of times, like, I call up and it's like, oh, you need a new credit card? Give me the last 4 digits of your social. Anybody could get that. So it's, like I said, it's concerning because this is showing to me, like, once again, because I've followed this stuff for a while, how much risk is being created by these data brokers for your average consumer citizen in terms of the privacy of their data, and how sort of loose the rules are, if there are any real rules, about how these guys are allowed to operate. And then the thing that is really chilling, Alex, we mentioned there has not been a lot of updates about what's been going on with this. There has been one significant update post the data breach notification that NPD provided. Brian Krebs on his website had a scoop. He found out from, I guess, a reader had tipped him off that another background service check site that is a sister site or a property or subsidiary of NPD, called recordscheck.net, apparently was hosting an archive that included usernames and passwords for the site's administrators. That's not great. That's not great. No, we don't know how they were breached. We don't know how they got attacked. We don't know. But you're hosting an archive online, like, apparently it was a zip, and it's 6-character passwords for your admins. I mean, this is just, and apparently, I guess the founder of NPD contacted, apparently contacted Krebs and confirmed that the zip was real and it has been removed, and we're all good. And I'm just like, I look at that and I say, how is this allowed to happen? How are they allowed to have that much data about us and not have better security postures? Like what is there any regulation about these organizations and how they operate? It's really concerning.
Well, the hope is, I guess it's a funny thing to say hope about this, but the hope is that some Congress people are gonna drag this person on a live stream and go like, "What are you doing with people's data?" And maybe there are consequences as a result of that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't know what to hope for here because I feel like there's so much we don't understand. So I just but if it's as bad as it looks, I hope there's some sort of consequence for this, not for the sake of punishment, but for the sake to hopefully limit this from happening again this egregiously, at least based on what we kind of know.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting, regardless, like let's say it's only 100 million.
Yeah.
100 million people that were affected. So more than the 1.3 million, but far fewer than the 2.9 billion. I still want to know from them, number one, how did you have this archive online?
Hmm.
Like your admin usernames and passwords, just for anyone to pick up. Number two, what if you knew that a third party was trying to hack into your network in December of 2023, and you thought you might have been compromised? Why did it take until now to say that that happened? And you knew that they were trying to potentially leak the data or sell the data back in April, and it takes
Hmm.
until now? It takes until now to say something? That no, that's not okay. And it
Yep.
shouldn't take just a Ron Wyden or a couple other sort of forward thinking or tech savvy congressmen to sort of to push this to the forefront and to make this an issue and to get a hearing. Like there should be more people in the government who have deep concerns about this and are trying to do something about it. I just don't know if they will, because I don't know how important these data brokers are to, like we talked about, government, NSA, law enforcement. Who knows? Maybe they don't want to upset the apple cart, as they say.
Hmm.
Who knows? Maybe they'll turn around and they'll really hammer these guys and start implementing more regulations. But I can't say I'm very optimistic that that will happen.
No, not at all.
I mean, I started out this year trying to be more of an optimist, but I think I'm sliding back into my pessimism.
You know what? If you take a step back, there are things to be optimistic about in security, right?
Sure.
There's the lockbit takedown
Yep.
suggests law enforcement is getting more creative, and my impression is that idea hasn't slowed down.
Yep.
Um let me see. Spyware vendors,
Yep.
folks are law enforcement's or governments are at least paying attention to that. So that's good. Um and I guess one of the nice things about the AI security boom, one of the few nice things maybe, is that because it's vendor led and there's so much money in it, um defenders at least have a head start on the threats that are gonna come out of that, I guess.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That one's kind of a little touch and go, but there are good things happening, even if it's not this breach,
You're
unfortunately.
you're right. You're right. And maybe we will find out that this is just another wild goose chase from a threat actor who talked this stuff up, and it's the emperor has no clothes, and this is all just a bunch of junk data with maybe a little bit of valuable data in there, but it's being way overstated. Who knows? I hope we get some answers on this soon. And if it takes the government pressing NPD to provide those answers, then I'm all for it, because yeah, I obviously we've mentioned this is a big crossover story. There's a lot of people concerned. They're reading a lot of the breathless coverage out there that may be a little getting a little carried away about the effects of this breach. But I mean, like we said, they should be asking these questions and they deserve answers. So
100%.
we'll see if we get them. We'll see if we get them. But we can leave it
Yep.
there for now. I'm sure we'll have more to write about this and discuss as time goes on. But Alex, I appreciate you jumping on the microphone to discuss this with me.
Anytime.
And thank you to the readers and listeners of Tech Target and the Risk and Repeat podcast. I'm Rob Wright, and we'll see you next time.